Hi, I'm Metta Spencer. We're going to have a global town hall. That's what we do on the last Sunday of every month. Project Save the World hosts a get together for activists all around the world. And we check in and see what we're up to. Hello, friends. I'm going to say hello to Paul Werbos because I can see your photo. Hi, Paul. How are you doing? Oh, good. We have somebody from Ukraine checking in with us. A peacenik in Kyiv. At least I suppose he's still in Kyiv. Bless your heart, Andrei. Hello, Andrei Kamenshikov. How are you? Yeah, Andrei is an organizer of peace movements or groups throughout Eastern Europe. He's a Russian American, but he lives in Kyiv.
I'm outside right now, and it's already dark here. But
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, how are you? And what's I'm glad to know that you're able at least to contact us. What's up, fella?
Well, yeah, I won't be able to be online for long. Maybe 20 minutes or so, because today's actually it's a holiday. It's Easter here in Ukraine, and I'm visiting with some friends here. But I did want to raise a few questions during our meeting. So
get right to it. You've got the floor.
Okay, thank you. Well, the main question that I have is, it might sound a little weird, but I'm looking for any potential ideas on or any potential leads to the leadership of either China or India or both, because I believe that these two countries and their leaders have the potential to influence the leadership of Russia at this point. And basically, the idea is very simple. It's to try to encourage the leaders of India and China to send a signal to Mr. Putin that would make it clear that there shouldn't be any that basically that the use of nuclear weapons should be completely out of the question. Because unfortunately, we are right now in a situation where this is not only imaginable, but it might even be quite probable in the near future. The reality is that Russia's invasion failed. Russia's incursion into Ukraine failed. And I expect that probably in a few weeks or maybe a month or so, we will see a complete turn in the way that things are developing on the ground militarily. Ukraine is getting very significant support right now from the West, and it already outnumbers the Russian forces. It already has new advanced equipment, and it's getting more of it. And obviously, it has the moral advantage. What that means is that unless there's some kind of political settlement in the next few weeks, which I don't really believe in the relatively near future, we might see some major Ukrainian counteroffensives in the areas that are currently controlled by Russian troops, and of course by these separatist groups that are on their side. And that will have very dramatic consequences, both for the situation on ground, as well as for the future of the political regime in Moscow. And under these kind of circumstances, the risk that Mr. Putin and the people surrounding him might turn to this last trump card that they believe they have, which is obviously the nuclear arsenal that Ukraine doesn't have. That that possibility will unfortunately be quite high, because basically that's the only thing that they will have left, and they will have reason to believe that a military defeat might mean the end of might, let's say, not directly, but might lead to the end of
Hello? Andre? There has been already quite a discussion of that on the Pugwash listserv, and I can forward some material to him about that. There's a real debate among people who should know as to whether or not even China has any influence with Russia. And I think probably the consensus is that India would have considerably less influence. Nevertheless, Andre, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back now. I believe that today it is very important to try to use every possible mean to draw this red line. And the two countries that might be difficult for Mr. Putin to ignore are, of course, number one is China, and number two is India, because these are the two nations that have been, relatively neutral, if not supportive of Russia in the case of China, maybe, but at least relatively neutral in this situation. And today, due to the economic sanctions in the West, Russia is almost totally dependent on relationships with these two nations. So if there is a clear signal from their leaders that this is a red line, that if this line is crossed, then Russia cannot, the Russian leadership cannot count on remaining, relationships, or at least remaining neutrality of these two countries, their relationship with Russia. Mm-hmm. That could be something. Obviously, we don't know what factors might play out, but these may be very serious factors in any potential calculations on the part of Russian leaders.
Okay, I think what we should do now is focus exactly on answering Andre's question. He wants suggestions from anybody here about how best to influence the Chinese and Indian leadership to try to influence Putin vis-a-vis nuclear weapons. Paul Werbos.
I haven't had as much of the usual kind of connections, but I've had a lot of discussions with key people in China in particular, and somewhat India. The obvious issue is, if you want China or India to talk to Putin, to tell him not to use nukes, the obvious thing is they have to propose an alternative. If Putin wants to use nukes, he will do so under certain strategic calculations. The obvious question is, what is the alternative? What alternative could the Chinese or the Indians present to Putin as a better path?
Good point. Yes, Lou Kreisberg.
Well, I think that the other shoe is that the United States and Great Britain indicate that there is a negotiable solution that is feasible. We have not indicated what that might be, and I think the Ukrainians have made it clear that what terms might be acceptable, and if that was agreeable with the U.S., that there was some new order or some understanding about the limitations of NATO, that would make a possible negotiation more acceptable. A good number of people outside of the government have begun talking much more about the need for negotiation. And I think that it's certainly what the leadership, I think, in Ukraine are interested in. They're realists. They'll fight, but they know that there's a limit.
Zelensky has said, yes, we will accept neutrality. Yes, we will accept that there'll be some federal system with more autonomy for the Donetsk and Luhansk. No, we will not talk about Crimea right now, but we'll bracket it for future discussion. And what else? What has he said are his terms right now? And if those are the terms, why won't Putin accept those? Or what are the sticking points in the current level of negotiations? Do you know that? Or is that even publicly announced, Andre, in Kyiv? Can't hear me, I guess. Does anybody else know what the Russians have said their terms would be, their acceptable term now?
I don't know the terms that are being discussed right now in detail. As I understand, the key, but as I understand, whatever I heard is that the positions of the two sides are still very, very far apart. And today, if a few weeks ago, the Ukrainian negotiators were trying to find some kind of compromised option that would, for example, include a neutral status for Ukraine, but with very strong military guarantees from many other countries. And also, which would mean that Russian troops pull back to the territories that they held before the beginning of the war, the territories of the separatist, so-called separatist republics in the east of the country. And also they were proposing a 15-year term of negotiations over the status of Crimea. That, for Russia, that would basically mean a defeat, that basically their whole military campaign failed.
Mhm.
But at least it then give them some kind of, at least Putin could claim that Ukraine promised this neutral status. That was one thing that Ukraine was ready to yield a little bit upon.
Wouldn't it involve some change in the status of Donetsk and Luhansk, that they would have more autonomy than Ukraine has been willing to offer until now, or not?
Well, that's a long issue, because there were these so-called Minsk agreements signed in 2015, and where something like that was proposed. The problem was that it seemed that neither Ukraine nor Russia were really prepared to implement key elements of that agreement. So that question of some local autonomy, of course, could still be included. But here's the situation today. Ukraine is much more confident than what was just a month ago. It's clear that the Russian military offensive is failing.
Well,
And,
sorry, but it's not clear to me. It's clear that they failed in the attack from the north, but it's not clear at all yet that the attack, that the war in the east is going to go badly for them. I would, in fact, kind of expect them to do a whole lot better there once they get going. That is Russia.
where they tried to get going a week ago and they didn't reach any progress whatsoever, any significant progress whatsoever.
Oh, I figured they haven't really tried yet, that they're waiting to get going.
No. They've tried and they basically failed. And the Russian military is not in a state. I mean, I'm just giving you the fact. You can, we can discuss that, but I mean, so far I seem to be quite accurate in my predictions anyway. But whatever, I don't know. I don't know what the front line will be. But it doesn't really make any difference, even if Russia is relatively successful on a tactical level in some areas in the east. It doesn't change anything. The fact is that Ukraine will not surrender. That the most of Ukraine will stay under the control of the government of Ukraine. It is able to mobilize, and in the very near future, it will have both the advantage in numbers, the advantage in technology, and it always had the moral advantage, the advantage in motivation. That, and with all that, there's just no way that Russia can really win, even if they take some territory. That won't have any long-term outcome for the new long-term consequences for the outcome of this war. And what basically, Ukraine is simply gathering its strength right now to begin forcing the Russian troops out of its territory. And by all reasonable estimates, it will have the means to do that on many, at least in many sectors. And we don't.
Look, Andre, I don't want to argue with you because you know more than I do, and you're there. But I want somebody else to take a position one way or another to as to whether or not the analyses of people that you hear and respect fit what Andre is saying. Because I think, Andre, I don't think everybody agrees with you, everybody who's knowledgeable. I really don't think that is a consensus of opinion that Ukraine is all poised to defeat Russia. Now, I'm going to ask other people because it's just not between you and me.
If I'm wrong, then my main concern might be not as acute as I think it is, because I'm pretty sure that Russia will not resort to nuclear weapons unless it's faced with the perspective of military defeat.
Okay.
My analysis tells me that it will be facing the perspective of military defeat in the next month and a half, if not before that. However, I might be wrong, but I can tell you that, when, a few days before the war began, and even the first day or two that the war began, the whole world was waiting for a quick victory for Russia. And I was absolutely certain that is totally out of the question. I was certain that Russia will not be able to capture Kiev, for example, and things like that. So far my analysis seemed to work. Anyway, but that's not the issue. The issue today is we don't know. I might be wrong, and maybe then the threat is not that big. But if things start going in the direction that I expect them to go, then there will really not be much of a chance for almost no other arguments that Putin will have except this, and that's when the risk of nukes might be highest. And one of the ways to prevent that is, I believe, to work with the leadership of China and India. There's not that much time. I mean, we're speaking about weeks, really.
Okay, now look, I've already asked people if they have any clues as to whether or not the Chinese really have any influence. Nobody has volunteered to speak to that question. So now what my question is, do other people who are here have information or ideas, or have been watching analysts who have been projecting the next few weeks of the war? Who's going to win? I mean, because Andre is in a way, more optimistic from the perspective of Ukraine, and in a way more pessimistic from the perspective of nuclear weapons. And some of you folks, I'm sure, have been listening to analysts of this and have heard other various points of view. And I'd love to invite somebody to speak besides Andre and me.
There seems to be some consensus that the resistance would persist. And that's why an occupation of Ukraine would certainly not be possible or feasible or desirable. Every voice I hear says militarily, like the original idea of 150,000 was way too weak a force to occupy a country like Ukraine. But the matter of a defeat in a particular region and area, that's I don't know how clear that is, and I hear different kind of versions about what's going to happen in the next week in that basis.
Well, I mean, they've got Mariupol now, and they want to go right up and make this land bridge between the south and the Donbass, and then they're talking about going along, taking Odessa and moving into Moldova and Transnistria. Well, at least Transnistria, maybe also Moldova, who knows? But they're talking about encircling Ukraine, and they're not talking about it as if this is a crazy idea, but as, quite feasible. So that's what I think, there's certainly room for a conversation about that. And other people may, no doubt, have heard opinions.
If Russia is successful in what you just described, the southeast, and then west along the south coast to Odessa, hopefully if they gained that, but at quite terrible losses, then they might come to an agreement with Zelensky that the war would stop and Russia would keep that area if Zelensky would go along with it. But if, on the other hand, Russia loses in the southeast, that's where there'd be the dangerous choice, Putin losing, whether to choose, despite losing, being allowed to have that bridge to the southern peninsula there. Crimea, give him that and stop, rather than his other choice of possibly nuclear weapons. So, and in that case, the case of Russia losing militarily, as Andre thinks they might or will, the India and China perhaps having some influence, that Putin's choice will be to, and Zelensky's would be to let Putin have a little bit more than before February, despite losing, so that the war would stop and nuclear weapons would not be used. And so I just, last evening or the evening before, and some of the news I heard on the Canadian CBC television, that interviewing people in India, that population as well as government is to, quote, remain neutral. So that would allow them, from the perspective of whatever goes on when things settle down, they'll still have their help in various ways from Russia, but also there's the motivation that they could act as negotiators or between
Mediators, something.
Mediators between Ukraine and Russia. And also, this was the reason I believe that certainly Sweden and also Finland, up till this past February were not joining NATO, specifically Sweden, because Sweden was the chief country on the books working with the UN and the TPNW modifications, the treaty to prohibit nuclear war or weapons, I should say. Sweden was not joining NATO specifically so that it could remain a mediator that the Russian side would accept. This was before February,
Mhm.
to eliminate nuclear weapons. And Finland, I think, had the same idea, but now finding itself bordering Russia and being the one other country like Ukraine that not being a member of NATO would make them vulnerable to the same kind of attack that Ukraine is undertaking, that in the past week, both Finland and Sweden are fast-tracking joining NATO.
Macron went and, tried to be polite, talk nicely to Putin, and Bennett of Israel, and I think even Erdogan of Turkey. Maybe some other folks have been going over there. The Pope was talking about what was going to go have some conference with an Orthodox patriarch, but I guess that's off. There are a lot of people who want to offer their good offices, but who's promising? Clearly the Chinese have more influence than any other country with Putin, but is that enough to?
And China will be utterly critical. There is no way to escape the fact that the policies of China will decide whether we have nuclear war or not. They will decide what the outcome of this is. So I'm very glad that Andre raised the question. Anyone who has a trivial answer doesn't understand the Chinese, because it's not so trivial. The role of China. Where to begin? It's utterly critical, but it's actually also critical to understand the psychology behind Mr. Putin. There have been lots of writings about what Putin is thinking. Putin and Xi, among their many critical feelings, they both have a strong feeling that we idiots in the English-speaking world haven't read what they've written, that we haven't paid attention to their central concerns. And there's no way we can have peace in the world if we don't try to develop a deep understanding of what these two very important people, Putin and Xi, have in mind. In the case of Putin, he hasn't been so shy. He's talked a lot. And before he did this Ukraine event, he spoke up about, basically, he used to be a promoter of free markets and democracy. He was working with Yeltsin. He was trying to promote free markets and democracy. He became more and more cynical and frustrated because we in the West have not always lived up to our ideals. And half of the reason why we have a problem in Ukraine is that we needed to live up more to our own ideals about markets and democracy and freedom of speech. And with the internet changing, the issue of freedom of speech with a government-controlled internet has become more and more of a problem. So that's one aspect of it. And so far as I can tell, the problem became just so frustrating to Putin, he's been saying, okay, let's go back to the czars already. Russian friends of mine have said, you've got to read the movies of Bulgakov. Bulgakov, who was a friend of Stalin, put out several really important movies, one of which was about the White Army in the Ukraine, and it maps into what's happening today in such beautiful detail. My Russian friends tell me, you've got to see Bulgakov's movie on the Ukraine. But beyond that, there's this Xi. And Xi, more than Putin, is the one who is in control. Xi, 2 years ago, was saying the internet is becoming a problem. Not just freedom of speech, but a million other problems. He proposed an international collaboration to develop a more open, transparent set of rules for the internet. I know that technology. I was very impressed by Xi's statement, and I was deeply disappointed that nobody important in the United States followed up on Xi's statement. Xi's proposal was not perfect, but it was a starting point. And my gut feeling is the only way we're going to get Xi to work on Putin to get a better path is if Xi sees a chance to go back to his original proposal for an open, international, transparent internet system that will help solve Russia's problems and help discipline our own crazy demons, of whom we have a few. So anyway, those.
Oh, no, go on, elaborate. What in the world is he proposing? Because I never heard it. And everything I hear about either Russia or China is that everything they want in terms of internet is absolutely their control over everything people say or think or hear. Is that
And
correct?
what's
Or
scary is that what you have heard, what you're just referring to, is filtered news. And it's really scary how much the news we get is filtered. But the internet itself has a lot of data if you know how to track the internet, which some of us know how to do. So there are two files I saw once. The Foreign Ministry of China often publishes things which are obnoxious, misleading, and terrible and awful. But they have also posted two very important documents in the last few years. One of them in the last few months, one of them a few years ago. And I tried to draw the attention of key people in the US to the one a couple years ago. A few years ago, she said, let's have an international collaboration. Let's have an international collaboration to build a new global transparent internet control platform to coordinate us, which at the very least guarantees that there won't be backdoors in the key software. And
I'm sorry, but can that be guaranteed? I thought that was an art, a very sophisticated kind of savvy that people had to have in order to figure out the mysteries of the back door.
this is one of the big problems we have. I talked about that on my climate talk on Friday. We have conflicts of interest. We have vested interests who are bullshitting to the world because they want to make their own money. And when it comes to backdoors, there are 1 million companies making money off of cybersecurity who are doing useful, tiny things, kind of like cleaning the mess under your desk. But there are also technologies. And it turns out there are two technologies in particular, which we could have used to harden the Android systems, the financial systems, the power control systems. These are the systems we would need to make the US invulnerable to cyber attacks from China and Russia. And I was shocked 4 years ago to discover the US does have the technology to make our power system totally invulnerable to these kind of cyber attacks, the worst case cyber attacks from Russia or China. And we haven't been deploying the technology that we have buried in places like the NSA, because there are certain people in the NSA who say, if you deploy that technology, other people will deploy it, and we won't be able to shut down those other countries. And in order to increase our ability to shut down other countries, we have to hide, conceal, and oppress the technology we have to make our own grid secure. And I happen to know that technology because I've been working in the computer business. I knew the people. In fact, I used to be close to the #1 expert in the world on what's called the Rainbow Book technology for absolute, totally guaranteed, secure operating systems. But the guy died of old age. What can you do? It was sad to me that he died of old age like 1 week after the last time I talked to him. It was.
Did he leave his knowledge someplace for other people?
His knowledge still exists. The Rainbow Book technology exists. The scary part is it's important to the NSA. And there was a time when the National Security Agency had a legitimate reason to try to hide this technology. And because they worked hard to hide it, it became almost unknown in the US, but well known in Russia and China. That also happens with certain kinds of nuclear technology, where we worked hard to hide it. And that worked in our country, but meanwhile, Russia and China were developing those technologies.
Okay, now what I hear you saying is that if we were smart and want to give Andre a good answer, our answer should be trade with Xi, offer to pick up his excellent ideas, which I'm going to trust you are excellent. I don't believe it, but if you say they are, I like you, so I'll believe you. I trust you. But otherwise I would have believed that that's not possible. Anyway, if she had a good idea, let's say, okay, we'll take your idea if you'll pressure Putin not to use nuclear weapons. Is that the general proposal? Paul?
That's a good description of a part of it. But obviously, we got to get the details too.
Okay.
Yes, I think the basic idea is right. She can tell Putin, you have legitimate concerns about the internet being misused in ways that hurt you, that don't help the people. In order to serve the people and serve your security, how about you work with me to go to this damn United States and United Nations and follow up on this global secure internet proposal you had?
Where did he make that proposal? Because the only people I know who have any awareness of international transactions about trying to regulate the internet are Paul Myers and Alison Pitlack. And I know they have a network of friends. But the idea is that the United Nations has this open-ended working group. At least that's one of the things they've had for 2-3 years, and it never got anywhere. So I think they have a second organization that's also working on the same general notion of proposing some sort of regulation of the internet that would be benign and that would sort of make it impossible to have a real cyber war in the sense of one country attacking another country's infrastructure. So if she presented this to the open-ended working group or to any other entity that's accountable to the United Nations, maybe that's how we could, where we could go to promote what you're suggesting. If you convince people like Paul Meyer that she's proposal was really a benign one.
So you guys are better in the politics than I am, to put it mildly. When it comes to politics, I have zero tact, so I can help someone else who takes the initiative. So I volunteer to help, but one of you guys has to be in charge.
Well, I want you to be in touch with Paul Meyer. And I'm sorry Paul isn't with us today, but I can surely put you in touch because that is his main bag now. He's working on trying to get some sort of international regulation of the internet that would be acceptable to all around and that would rule out the most likely and dangerous forms of cyber war. So let's put you two together and you can talk to him about what it was that you think that his group should promote. And then let's, maybe the rest of us can chime in with ideas about politicians we know who might be able to help out.
Connect the two balls.
Here's Michelle Duguay. Yes, Michelle.
Well, it would seem to me that this question of cybersecurity fits within the bigger problem of assuring international security from every point of view. Security from nuclear weapons, from conventional weapons, from pandemics, from famines. We have many problems, and you just cannot have 6 different buildings at the United Nations where in each building one group is discussing something. There has to be an integration. There has to be an acceptance, first of all, of this notion of international security. I believe that the peace movement is largely a believer in international security, and then it has to be broadened into the cyberspace.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, Michelle just said something that's worthy of further thought. It's more than just the war in Ukraine, certainly. And I'm sorry that we don't seem to have Jerry Glenn. He was on here at first.
Yeah, he was. I don't know. He's not here now.
He has gotten support from the Secretary General of the UN, Guterres, for a new effort on something called existential threats. And the internet really would fit beautifully in that framework. But the first existential threat they were talking about is climate change. And that was the first thing that Guterres and Curry were trying to present to the Security Council a couple of years ago. And the Security Council said no because Russia and China representatives said no. But this Friday, I gave a talk on climate change and how it affects all of the nations. And I got an email from China yesterday saying we in China would like to establish a new office in the United Nations. Perhaps I should tell them about what Jerry's working on, which would address climate survival. And that's what the Secretary General wanted. And if the right people in China now want a security office that starts with climate and then works into the internet, there might be some hope for us crazy little creatures.
Perfect. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, it has gone beyond the military. What is troubling in the States is that most of the first commentators are former generals of this or that, and it is totally militarized when all these other possibilities and issues are relevant and have some mutual benefit possibilities. For global warming, the problems in Siberia are immense. It's there is a melting of so much land in Siberia, holes opening up in the land. We should certainly have that problem in Alaska as well, and share some ideas about how to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very important question, and we can come back to that. I just did I did 2 talk shows in the last week that bear on that question. So this is something very much on my mind. It is not something that is high priority to most people in the world now, because we got so distracted by this war that people, even the few people who were paying a little bit of attention to global warming, are not paying attention to it now, especially in Russia, you know, and some of the research that has been going on in Russia has to be curtailed because of the fact that they're shutting off relations between the East and the West. And the woman I interviewed just 3 days ago said that she'd planned to go to Siberia to do research this summer, and she can't go because of the war. So, you know, we're being distracted. And of course, the other part is there's this huge new emphasis on the importance of providing weapons to Ukraine. And I understand why they think they need weapons. For heaven's sake, if I were there, I'd probably feel the same way, even though I hate to admit it as a peace activist. But I probably would feel the same way. I'm scared to death of being run over the way those people in Mariupol have been. But, you know, the need for weapons and the intention of creating and giving more weapons to one side or the other. And then the fact that people are simply just, they're going to have to use a lot more gas and provide a lot more oil for these, the fact that they can't just so quickly transition over to renewable resources. So there's going to be a great boost in support for fossil fuels again, just when we were hoping to go the other direction. So this whole war has created so many contradictory and disturbing trends that it's just awful. Andre?
I live in Kiev, and I understand right now that there is a probability that's significantly greater than 0%, that in the next month or month and a half, I might be vaporized by a nuclear blast over my head. And I understand that if there is any way to get Chairman Xi and President Modi to tell Mr. Putin that, dear, our nice friend, Mr. Putin, we're neutral. We don't want to interfere. We are ready to maintain as much as possible economic relationship with Russia. We've added all the good cooperation over these years, but please, it would be very important not to cross a certain red line, and that is the use of weapons of mass destruction, because that may make it quite difficult for us to continue this, good and productive relationship. Something like that, to draw a red line on this particular point. If that is done, I understand that the probability, the percent of probability of me being vaporized in the next month and a half goes down some.
So you're saying the really important thing is to bear in mind the getting to China, and you think also India.
India just recently purchased a lot of Russian oil with great discounts, and basically India's policy is to continue its economic cooperation with Russia. And right now, of course, it's very favorable for India because Russia, it's cornered in. It needs to sell whatever it has at great discounts to any potential buyer that there is, on the world market.
Boris Johnson was just in India to visit Modi, I believe. I don't know many of the details, and I haven't heard what he said. Does anybody know whether he discussed anything relevant to what we're talking about here? My impression was that he was going there trying to wean him away from Russia back toward Western interests by doing maybe offering him some goodies of some kind. I don't know. Does anybody here know that one way or another? On Wednesday, it'll be a recording available on YouTube and on our website Wednesday night. And anybody watching it in the recording version, feel free to contact me, mspencer@web.net, and with your ideas, and I will pass them along as best I can to whomever you think is appropriate. Okay, have we exhausted this issue? I'd like to wind up with a little bit more information from Andre about what life is like there in Kiev. And you've got, in a way, a very upbeat kind of analysis where you think you guys are going to win the war, except you're not a warrior. How do you, by the way, I just received an email, which I haven't had time to read yet, but it is a compendium of, I believe, videos or articles by people who are experts on nonviolence, talking about ways in which nonviolence can be put to good use, even in a case where, say, Russia wins and occupies the country or during the war. My fear is that, peace activists are really good at telling people in advance what to do to prevent a war. And they never take our advice, but if they did, the world would be better off. But they are not, we are not successful, whatever, in helping people in the middle of a war. When blood is already being shed, I think there's practically nothing we can do to make it stop. And if anybody has any thoughts on this, now's the time to mention them, because this is the time when it's needed. And the articles that I've read, I haven't read yet, I want to read, say that there are things that could be done now. What are the suggestions that anybody here has to offer about how we can help people who are in danger, as Andre is, of being vaporized next week? Anybody?
That, yes, I believe that there definitely is a space for nonviolence, for peace building under the current circumstances as well. There's definitely a place for nonviolence in territories of Ukraine that have been occupied by Russia. And we can see some very impressive footage of people, protesting, and there are all kinds of things going on in these areas right now. There is also important tasks that need to be performed to ease tensions within Ukrainian society, tensions that are created by war, by mass displacement, and so on. There is also the need to continue to work and to provide proper messages to the Russian public in general, and to communicate with peace-building activists in Russia or from Russia, because very many people were forced to leave the Putin regime. So, in practical terms, the group that I'm linked with for many years, Nonviolence International, that's based in Washington, D.C., has recently opened a call for support for a proposal. I'm in a car right now. I can't send you the link right now, but I'm ready to share it with you as soon as I get to my computer. And basically, the idea is exactly that. There's lots of, obviously, Ukraine is getting lots of military support today. It's also getting significant humanitarian support. But what it needs to get, at least to some extent, is support for nonviolent action and for various other activities that would help the country, help bring peace back to the country by applying various non-military approaches to do that.
What was your organization, Andre? Something International?
Nonviolence International.
Nonviolence. Okay.
Yes, I'll send you.
23 ж.
Good.
Так. Ой, вибачаємось, ми думали сьогодні з 23. Дав мені коментар.
Andre, are you talking to a friend or what?
I'm actually crossing a checkpoint right now.
Oh,
Е,
oh, I see. Well, other people can talk while he's negotiating with his checkpointer. Lou Krinsberg, you look as if you want to say something.
It occurs to me, for one thing, the kind of resistance that is going on in Russia, the defections get very little play. There's an article in the New York Times about the Bolshoi losing so many of its leading stars. There was the thousands of high-level scientists in Russia who publicly deplored what the invasion. I think if that retained some more visibility, it'd make it more powerful than the one story briefly in some newspaper and then it's dropped. It strengthens that resistance and makes it more significant. It's a very simple thing to keep referring to that. And it also makes it clear that there is a Russia that is being hurt by what's going on and that we do want to have good relations with and make up for the mistakes maybe that we made in not being more useful to Russia in the early years after the Cold War ended.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you. And if Andre is through the checkpoint, maybe you want to resume what you were saying. And I take Lou's point of view, which is that we need to publicize those more. So I will do more to publicize those, except they're not reaching me. If you have information or stories to tell them to me and I'll try to publicize them somewhat.
Well, first of all, I'll send you the links from Nonviolence International. One of the problems is that, some of the things that you're doing, I don't know, it's lots of it is, the stuff is quite sensitive. So, it might not be the case, we need support, but it's not always the case that we can widely publicize, certain.
Oh, yeah, I know that. In fact, I feel very much in a bind because nowadays I'm hesitant to try to contact I have about 30 friends who are at least maybe more than that, who are Facebook friends in Russia. And most of them are on my side, I think, or at least they used to be. In fact, I wouldn't make a bet now by which side they're on, because some of them have actually switched over and now support the government position, which is shocking to me, but it's true. And of the people that I am in touch with or used to be in touch with, I'm afraid to contact them because I don't want to get them in trouble. I've been told that, I might get my friends thrown in jail for 15 years just by posting something on their Facebook page. Is that true?
Well, if you post it on your Facebook page, then that's not a problem.
Well, I've been told by Russians, do not post this on somebody's Facebook page because you can get them sent to prison for 15 years.
You mean post? How can you post something on someone else's Facebook page?
Yeah.
I don't understand how that's technically possible.
Well, sure it is. I can do it. I've done it, but I was told, don't ever do that again. Don't you know better than that, stupid? I mean, they were really angry.
Maybe comment, I mean, theoretically, that shouldn't be the case, but you never know. It is a crazy time, so it's best to be as safe as possible.
So don't post anything because I might get somebody in trouble.
Well, again, it depends, but no, you can post things on your Facebook page. I don't understand how it's technically possible to post something on another person's Facebook page, except for a comment, of course, in response to his post.
Well, if I did that, I'm told that that's potentially harming my friends.
Yeah, so maybe in that sense, in terms of commenting what's on their Facebook, maybe, but I think that's a little bit overboard because, if a comment comes from someone else, I mean, you can't control anyone commenting what you posted. So if you post something from your name, it's one thing, but if
You're being rational. I don't know how rational the government is, and
that's the thing. That's
yeah.
the thing.
And some of my friends are on their own Facebook pages. They're being very bold. I know one guy who has a big flag of Ukraine all over his homepage, and other, really very vocal in their support for Ukraine. Others are, you can see they're, instead of using the word war, they use SMO. It's a special military operation. So they're being careful not to use the word war because it might, they're not supposed to. I don't know. Okay, look, I'm monopolizing this. I don't really mean to talk too much. Other people speak more and I'll shut up.
So I was just listening because I'm no expert on war. I've always considered myself not an anti-war person, but a pro-peace person. But right now I find myself in this kind of situation where I have to support one side. So it's really hard for me to come up with, and I ask the experts here, what would be a negotiation like between Ukraine and Russia when Putin today, the Financial Times says that he's basically given up on any sort of negotiation because he just wants the expansion. But that has been all along. I understand what people say about Ukraine's interest in joining NATO or the EU and how that is a threat from Putin's and Russia's perspective. But what we are seeing now, how does that become an argument for not wanting a negotiation and just go ahead with the expansion, territorial expansion? So I just don't know how that would work right now after what we read today that Putin said.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Meta.
No, nobody going to respond to that. I'm not going to try again because I'm talking too much. Robert, let's go on to you, and maybe somebody else will want to come back to Maria's question.
A totally different thing, but it has to do with COVID and the current approach by everyone. And I think that everyone's talking about people in general, how much they should wear masks still and so on and so forth. But once in a while, they mention the at-risk people. I think the focus should be on at-risk people, the ones who are 70 years old or older, or under 70 and immunocompromised, and or for some other reason, or if they get COVID, they are at risk of hospitalization or death, because a lot of deaths are occurring. And most of, not all of those present right now are over 70 and in that category. So the focus should be on them and how they should protect themselves. And so I have right now just an email form that I could send and very briefly within about 3 minutes say what's on the email. But I was wondering if I have an email right now and with it on it, and is it netta.spencer@web.net? Would that get it?
Meta, like M like mother. Meta.
Oh.
Meta's,
Oh, with an M as in mother.
yeah, mspencer@web.net.
Okay. Just a moment.
You want me to circulate this? All right.
Yes.
And I want to encourage everybody to go there. And if you have anything to say about any of the subjects that we are discussing today, you can add to it or, dispute other people's thoughts. Just have a real conversation on the public comments column of the particular talk show, which will be 442 maybe, or 2. Anyway, it'll be the Global Town Hall of, here comes Alexei. Oh, wonderful. Here we have a man who's in Moscow now. I was worried that we weren't going to hear from Alexei today, precisely for the reasons that I've just been discussing, that I'm afraid, for the safety of my Russian friends who are pretty mouthy about what they think of Putin. And Alexei is one of those. He's a very courageous young man, and he's an interpreter in Moscow who's been quite expressive lately and has taken heart from some of the encouragement that we've given him on these talk shows, because he's in a really vulnerable situation. Hello, Alexei. How are you?
Hello. Glad to see you, Dr. Spencer. Glad to see you.
I'm so glad you're back with us. I was getting a little worried about you.
Thank you. But I'm alive and as well as I could be well in those troubling times of war.
Well, bring us up to date if you have thoughts about what can be reported. Let me tell you that we've had a rather lengthy but not very productive conversation already, in which the gist of it is this. I think you have already met Andrei Kamenshikov. He's gone away now. He's not able to be with us at the moment, but he came on right away from Kiev and was saying that his expectation is that Ukraine is going to be winning so decisively that Putin is going to feel that he's desperate. And when he gets desperate enough, he will use nuclear weapons. And the only people who are likely to be able to dissuade him from that would be Xi in China and maybe Modi in India. And that he was asking us to try to reach the people in China who might get Xi and Modi to try to remind Putin that he absolutely must not, under any circumstances, use a nuclear weapon. And I've been trying to think of ways of helping fulfill that request, but so far I don't think we've got very far. Tell me whether you think that is a reasonable request based on realistic appraisal of the prospective victory of Ukraine over Russia, or at least prevailing of Ukraine will prevail to some extent and make Putin more desperate. Tell us what your reaction would be to that notion.
I think, of course, Ukraine is going to win in terms of liberating its territory. It remains a question whether Crimea will be included in that territory or not. But for sure, we will get back to the Ukraine that we had prior to February 24. That's for sure. So Ukraine minus Crimea minus the two separatist republics. That's most certain. It remains to be seen whether Crimea and the Donbas republics will be liberated by the Ukrainian forces. But I think there is a chance that there will be success in that. However, President Zelensky acknowledged that any offensive on Russian territory, or what Russia thinks its territory is, including Crimea, could mean a third world war. So he wouldn't really force the decision to attack that territory. I think he's wise enough to be ready to converse on that, to negotiate on the fate of Crimea and the two republics, so-called republics.
I'm sorry, did you say you think he will be willing to negotiate or not?
He said so. President Zelensky said so.
Zelensky would, but would Putin? The crucial thing is, well, what will Putin agree to?
Putin needs something to be presented as a victory to the people, because people are overheated here. They've been told by the propaganda that the Russian army is fighting against the Nazis, which is a great point made by the propaganda, and people really take it seriously. A country which has lost at least 30 million people in World War II takes things like that seriously, inevitably. And so just saying we're back to February 23 would not be an option for him, because I think they've been testing the ground somehow. They've been trying to even the withdrawal from the outskirts of Kyiv was really perceived very negatively in the Russian society among such staunch supporters of Putin. They were really disappointed. And I think if this was testing the ground, it was really unsuccessful, because it showed that people really, those who support somehow or other the war and the invasion of Ukraine, they're really I'm sorry saying that, pissed off by the results of offensive on Kyiv, so they wouldn't accept that. Anything other than could be presented as a victory. So they're lost. How come we didn't take Kyiv? And if there are no territorial gains as a result of this war, Putin's core support will really be very much diminished. So if he doesn't have anything to sell as a victory, he might use some kind of maybe weapons of mass destruction. It might be.
That's exactly what Andrei thought.
Yeah. I'm afraid he's right in that. What could dissuade him from that could be, of course, Xi and the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, I think, and but I think there are also some people inside Russia who could do this. It's not that we can address them directly, but some public opinion in the West can. And I mean his family. I mean his daughters. I mean they won't like the situation in which their father becomes the one person who really unleashes that war. So if they feel that it's not acceptable, they can influence him somehow, I think.
Oh my God, what an interesting idea.
If they feel that the West is, if the West is really taking this apprehension seriously, I think they can go talk to their father not to do this. And I think any father.
Okay, so here, I'll tell you what, then what you're saying suggests we should get Ivanka Trump to call the Putin daughters, whose names I don't know, and say, ladies, let's get together and talk to our dads.
But here's a variation of that. My wife being Russian, I have seen films of Putin's daughters. We know these people very well. And they're endocrinologists. Kamala Harris, her mother is an endocrinologist. So if Kamala Harris and her mother could speak to Putin's daughters, that might actually work. Endocrinologists are very interesting people. I've had a lot of contact with them. They're very closely related to the brain research I've spent years on. That's what I'll be doing tomorrow and the next day, brain research projects for NSF. So Kamala Harris could speak to Putin's daughters. They understand endocrinology, and they're not stupid people. Maybe that communication could be useful.
Okay, and now we're getting somewhere. Who knows Kamala Harris's?
I don't know that.
Who knows Kamala Harris?
Meta. Kamala Harris' mother is deceased. So it would be
sorry.
Vice
Okay.
President
Sorry about
Harris.
that.
Okay, thank you.
Vice President.
I apologize. So her mother was an endocrinologist. So, but she still respects her mother. She understands what her mother did.
Well, I have diabetes, so I can talk to my diabetes endocrinologist. I don't think she's very political. But I'm joking because it's so far-fetched that it's ridiculous. But this is the kind of brainstorming that might produce some kind of interesting connection. Here comes Andrei Kamenchikov again. Maybe we'll have to bring him back up to date. Hello, Andrei. I'm glad you're back with us. Alexei Prokorenko is back with us today while you were away. And he agrees with your analysis that it would be under the circumstances where Putin is losing badly and can't stand to lose face that he might use nuclear weapons. So we're thinking about different ways in which people could get to people that might influence Putin. And it's been proposed that, here comes Erica Simpson too. It's been proposed that Putin's daughters are endocrinologists, which I didn't know, and that somebody should get them, maybe one of them, all right, and then ask this, and if you've got a high-profile endocrinologist who could talk to his daughter, get her to lean on her father. So I'm going to back off now and let Alexei speak for himself. Bring Andrei up to date about your joint proposal.
I'm just thinking that if anything can influence Putin's decision, even if he is serious about it, not just scaring the whole world, trying to blackmail the whole world with his ability to press the button. If he's serious about this, I think before he does, before he could do this, he could think about his daughters, about his other children. We don't know how many of them he has, about his grandchildren. He hinted that he has some. We don't know how many because he's very reserved about his family. But I think if he were to press the button, he would risk deteriorating his relationships with his family. So it's one thing when the whole world says don't do this. It's one thing when she or Narendra Modi says don't do this, please. although it will be a very powerful alliance if the whole world, including India, including China, will be against that. And it's another story when his very relatives tell him, "Dad, don't do this. We don't want our dad to kill the most beautiful of the worlds." I think that could be an option to somehow. I hear they're quite westernized. His daughters, they speak perfect English and they have lots of connections in the West. I think if something can really bring him off the idea of pressing the button, it's I think his family.
I know nothing about these women. I hardly knew there were any. But if so, have they ever expressed political opinions which would either confirm or oppose their father's statements? Anything indicating? I mean, like I think Ivanka Trump is kind of an interesting case because occasionally there's been a hint that she doesn't quite agree with her dad, and sometimes she yanks on his leash. Mm-hmm. For example, when he was putting children in cages, I think that was beyond her tolerance level, and she told him to back off. So occasionally things like that happen, but I think most of the time she goes along with whatever he says. Well, what's the relationship of this endocrinologist woman with her father?
It doesn't work like that here because really he never admitted openly that they were his daughters. The only confirmation that we have, I would say semi-official confirmation, is when they were put on the sanction list, I think by the US or probably by the European Union as well. And their names were on the list. And then there were some kind of utterance on that from Putin's press secretary. Other than that, he has never ever confirmed that those ladies were his daughters. Never ever. So he's made a point of keeping his family a top secret.
Well, but maybe they have spoken off the cuff when they were a little tipsy or something. Did any of them ever say anything that has been reported as reflecting their own opinions about?
Not publicly. No public talks on politics from them ever. I've tried to research on that, but never. They've never expressed any political opinions in public. No, that's a very serious point in the Russian politics, and that's a very serious concern for Putin to keep his family members from politics.
You and Andrei both agree that the best idea, really the most promising thing, is to get either Modi and or Xi to make an intervention with Putin about nuclear weapons. And when the conversation first began, I invited people to hazard some guess as to whether or not you can think of a way to get to either of these two men and get them to do exactly that. And nobody had anything to say, but let's reopen the possibility. Erica, you're with us, and a few other people who haven't had a chance to speak. If any of you newcomers have thoughts about this issue, this is a good time to speak up.
It's interesting because I'm just getting ready to do the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, and it's interesting because there's never any men in it. I have to make up roles like a secretary, and now we're in the same kind of a crisis, and there's still no men except for these wives. And I immediately at the beginning of this crisis looked to see if Putin was still with his second wife, who we know now is in Switzerland. And we think she had a set of twins, and then she had another child. Anyway, 3 kids with him. That's what she reputedly had. But she may be disaffected from him. I mean, she's living in Switzerland. And then his first wife, we think he had the 2 daughters that are grown up, and so they're under sanctions now. Whether he'd be pressured by his partners is an interesting question, and I think it's possible, but he's going to be more pressured by his inner military cabal. And those are the people that we really need to pressure. But I do find it ironic, Meta, that 60 years later, we're still talking about a group of men and no women. It's still
Right.
the same story, and they're
Well-
still acting in
There
the
is one.
same bullying way. And there's still, I mean, I can show you. I'm washing my telephones here. These are the telephones that were used in the 1960s. See these telephones? Craig, we still don't have a telephone hotline. That's what that was in the report by the Secretary of State and Biden. Remember, I just wrote a paper on this report, and they suggested, NATO and the Secretary of State officials, that we set up more hotlines with NATO officials. Well, we're doing this 60 years later. I just shake my head. Meta, you're shaking your head.
Well, I thought that we did. I know we did for a while. That was one of the things that was the news after the Cuban Missile Crisis said, oh, yeah, we did do that.
We have that hotline. We have a digital hotline between Russia and Washington. But what was surprising to me was in this report that was republished in El País, which is the Spanish newspaper, the American officials in their short report suggest that we establish more hotlines, as if this is a new and great new idea. And I looked at it, and thought, well, that's a great new idea, but we had that idea a long time ago. Anyway, just to return to my main point here, which is that women are missing, and it's the same threat condition, men threatening each other still, and I just wonder how we can change that. Thank you, Meta, for this opportunity, and I appreciate seeing
Well,
you.
after today's election, maybe Marine Le Pen is going to be the one.
Oh.
What?
she-
I looked at the data a few minutes ago. She was
Yeah.
losing last I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, is she really defeated? Hi, Kat. How are you? Is she really going down bad? I hope she goes with a thud. But how's she doing?
she's conceded defeat. She's conceded defeat, and she lost very badly. So that's good news. They're all celebrating in the street.
So she's lost bigger than they were afraid that she would.
Yes, the media trumped it up that she might win bigger, but I think it's 41.8% exit polls. But anyway,
Mhm.
basically in the low 40s, and he's in the high 50s. So it's looking good for the West and for democracy.
Okay. Well, even he made a trip, and he was trying to be kind of play nicely with Putin for a long time. I don't think he got very far with it, but I know he didn't, or we wouldn't be where we are now. But I don't know anybody else except, I mean, there was something about how, who's the guy in Turkey, and also Bennett in Israel. Both of them tried something. Is there any other high profile, head of state who could do what I would love to think that she and or Modi or both of them would do it, but I don't really believe it. Is there anybody else who might? Or are we stuck with Kamala Harris? Is that our best offer?
Well, look, we need to recognize that these two countries are the countries that have some leverage, especially China. India, at a lesser of it, but still, these are two countries that do have real leverage on Russia right now. And in the case of China, I'm pretty sure, though obviously I can't prove, and I don't know if anyone will ever will, that Putin did get a green light for his invasion from Xi before the invasion began. I'm pretty sure that it's true that he was specifically requested not to start any military operation till the end of the Olympics. And, so he followed that advice and so forth. And just a few months before that, it was China that basically demanded that Russian troops leave Kazakhstan, when they were brought in there to pacify, let's say, they is in Russian terms, the country, during the protests in January, and they left, even though it didn't seem that was the original plan. Anyway,
Wait a minute, who influenced whom in Kazakhstan?
In Kazakhstan, there was this uprisal against the government, and there was this in the beginning of January, Russia. Under there's this union of this joint military union between Russia and some other post-Soviet states, Belarus, Armenia, I think. Who else is there? Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. I think these are, maybe Tajikistan as well. And they have some kind of military alliance. And so this was under the name of this military alliance. They sent troops to Kazakhstan on the request of the acting president of Kazakhstan, who asked for military support to control the situation. They came in there, but of course these were primarily Russian troops, with symbolic presence of other countries. And when they came in, the attitude in Russia was, yes, we'll help the president, but then, we need to stay, we need to have our military bases there, we need to put certain conditions that Kazakhstan's policies, take into consideration our interests and things like that. And about a week later, there was a clear message from Beijing that China is not happy with Russia staying there. China is probably okay with them coming, not welcoming, and so they, there's no military bases or anything like that. So basically, they left, and in a week or 10 days, they all left. And then they said, see, this is our, we came in, we did the job, and we left, so as if this was the original plan, which obviously was not. But also maybe the Kazakh leadership played it both ways. Obviously, China has huge investments in Kazakhstan and huge leverage. They have a long border. The country is very dependent on China. But in this case, Russia was kind of forced, to follow Chinese advice. And I just want to be clear that, Putin, we're not speaking about global nuclear holocaust here. We're speaking about the potential of use of relatively low yield tactical nuclear weapons in the battlefield. That's what I think the Russian military is contemplating right now. And what they are thinking of is two, let's say, in their rationale, why they might be thinking of this. There are two key factors in the favor of using nuclear weapons. Number one is obviously a military factor. If the Ukraine is capable of going on defensive in a major way, it will need to concentrate its forces quite, in certain areas. And that's when, because when the forces are spread out, tactical nuclear weapons don't really mean that much. I mean, they don't change the military situation very much. But if you have your forces concentrated, what you need to do if you want to go on into attack, if you're on the offensive, then obviously you're bringing them together, and then that is a relatively, good in quotes target for some weapons of mass destruction.
So it would be the Ukrainian forces would be massing for an attack, and that's when they would get hit by a tactical nuke.
What I'm telling you is, that's the military rationale. But there's another even more important rationale, is that by doing this, we send a message to the world, well, to the West primarily, that, hey, we are totally insane, and so, it's like, we are driving this truck blindfolded. And so please, free the highway for us. It's like, if a guy, it might be actually a rational calculation in their sense that by doing something like that, we shake the table or we turn it upside down. And then everybody sees that, okay, look, nobody wants a nuclear holocaust. So we need to, accommodate Russia in some ways, so it's not completely, defeated on the battlefield, because then, what if they start bombing Europe,
Right. That's what Tom Schelling, used to say back in the 60s. I remember going to his lectures and he at Harvard, and he was saying there are times when the rational person wants to make it look like he's crazy, because then people will, say, well, you never know what this guy's going to do, so we better just, give in to him. So that's an interesting point, that might be not just a real craziness, although it certainly would be psychotic, but it might be actually motivated by some rationale. Okay, very good. Hello, Liz Carmichael, welcome. We're having a very complicated discussion about how to end this war in Ukraine, or how to prevent at least the use of nuclear weapons. And maybe I'll bring other people who've come more recently up to date. Earlier on, Andrei Kamenchikov, who's online here with us from Kiev, was saying that what we need to do is get to Xi and Modi and ask them to lay the law down to Putin that he must not, under any circumstances, use nuclear weapons, because he thinks that the Ukrainians are actually going to be prevailing militarily, and Putin may feel he's desperate enough that that's the only thing left to him, and he might do it. So we've been thinking about ways of getting to Xi and Modi, but in fact, nobody has a clue how to do that. So we've been thinking of other things. And one of the things was what Paul Werbos proposed an hour ago, saying that we should take seriously a proposal that Xi made with respect to regulating the internet about 2 or 3 years ago, because he had quite a decent proposal, should be taken seriously, and was just brushed aside. And he really did have some good ideas. So the idea here would be maybe we could get somebody who's an expert on negotiating some sort of treaty regarding the regulation of nuclear weapons internationally, to propose to Xi that we'll go along with your proposal on the internet if you will please make sure you yank on Putin's leash. So have I done a fair job of summarizing our discussion up to the present, or can I be corrected? Anybody?
Well, I think a little clarification might be helpful, because these are tricky, subtle issues. And I emphasized before, we need to understand, where is Putin really coming from? And when I read his list of grievances, why he's been driven almost to desperation, I'd say that fixing up how the internet works in terms of democracy and other variables would be a way of addressing some of the concerns that Putin had with a more constructive international approach. So Xi's proposal is partly a way to make friends with Xi to get a trade-off with Putin, but it's also a way to try to address Putin's underlying concerns in a more peaceful way.
Okay, thank you.
Meta, can I mention Kazakhstan? Actually, I agree with the speaker that Kazakhstan has taken Russia's side because it's a Russian colonial power and a military dictatorship. But before all this happened, Kazakhstan was also very affected by nuclear tests. And as a result, they have held many conferences that have been attended all around the world on ending nuclear testing above ground. And they've also sponsored and put a lot of their money, they have a lot of money into conferences for nuclear disarmament. And so although on the surface, just like China on the surface is implicitly supporting Russia, perhaps behind the scenes there are undercurrents of doubt and questioning. Just like during Thomas Schelling during the Cold War, Herman Kahn stood up and said, okay, Thomas, if that's so rational, if that's what deterrence means, then the most rational thing for me to do is to throw my steering wheel out the window when I'm careening in chicken toward you in game theory. So, you know, Herman Kahn said, let's take this to the rational outer limits. That means if I'm in a threat situation like Russia and US is now, the most rational thing for Putin to do is to say, I cannot control my commanders in the field, and they may use nuclear weapons. I'm sorry. That's what you do in a deterrent situation where you're trying to convey a credible threat.
Mhm.
That's what Herman Kahn taught us. And that's why Thomas Schelling got the Nobel Prize. So anyway, you were so lucky, Meta, to listen to those lectures. But I listened to Anatole Rappaport on game theory, and he taught me a lot. And he taught me a lot about deterrence and game theory. And if you want to conquer these guys in that sort of tit for tat, then you play tit for tat, which means that you negotiate, you cooperate, and you look for any indications behind the scenes. You cooperate with Kazakhstan. You send ambassadors to Kazakhstan. Send them everywhere and try to show that you're cooperating, because the noise right now, the noise called noise in game theory is so strong that to indicate you want to get out of this situation, to step back. In deterrence theory, you have to really shout. So we have to shout in the peace movement. We really have to shout. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, because I agree. We need to shout, and I don't know how to shout louder than we're doing, and we're not getting anywhere, frankly. I don't think that, you know what I'm hearing? I'm actually hearing more people in the peace movement say, well, I'm on Russia's side. Honestly, I think the majority of, I shouldn't say this because I really have no way of knowing, but of the emails that I received, I get more people saying I support Russia from peace activists than I get people saying, how can we help the people in Mariupol survive or keep our friend Andre from being vaporized. Nobody's talking that way. We're talking about, well, it's really all the US fault. I mean, honestly, I hear that. Do any other people hear that? I hope my friends are creeps and that it's not real, that it just happens that I have a bad sample of idiot friends. But anybody want to speak to that? No.
I think we have a couple of people.
Precisely, that's why I wanted to join you today, because I have friends mostly on the left side of the spectrum. And I am concerned because my discussions with them have been precisely that. I am in kind of in the middle, because I do not like this warfare and this war talking. And I find myself supporting Ukraine and the Ukrainian cause, but I understand that it goes against my own beliefs about peace and war and you know, this whole talk. I've learned more about war and ammunition than I'm learning about other stuff, and I don't like it. But I don't want this to be the slaughter that it is. I'm contributing, you know, money for Jose Andres and the World Central Kitchen. I'm doing what I can, but my friends on the left say it's Ukraine's fault because, you know, they have to give Putin something. And my concern is that when my friends repeat that, I'm thinking about all the discussions we've had about post-colonialism, about, you know, this is something that is part of the conversation. What about sovereignty? What about people's identity and need to preserve their own culture? That's what's missing. I'm looking at it not from a political science perspective, even though I am, but I'm looking at it from a sociological perspective. And that concerns me because I have more affinity with people on the left than even sometimes with the center moderate that I usually identify with. Of course, never, ever with the right. That is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else on this? Yeah, Liz, hi.
Hello, well, I don't have a solution, but the problem is we should never have got to this position. And I think the USA does bear some blame in that together with Europe, we failed after the end of the Cold War to fully embrace Russia. We tended to leave them out and probably to humiliate them. And that allowed Putin's kind of Russian nationalism to get a grip. And now I think it's almost a madness that has overtaken Putin, and because of his grip on information in Russia, a great deal of Russia as well, and that's the tragedy.
Thank you. I see that David Miller has just joined us. You're a latecomer, David, and I don't know whether I can bring you up to speed. Basically, apportioning blame for the current war and the difficulty of deciding not only whom to apportion, who should get the larger slice of blame, Russia or NATO. And I think that a lot of people are, including Liz Carmichael, who just spoke from Britain, have said that we should be paying more attention to the responsibility of Western countries in not having, having made some bad decisions that encourage the upsurge of nationalism that is now being manifested in Russia's aggressive
I heard
policy.
what Liz said, and I agree with her wholeheartedly.
In my book on Realizing Peace, I did make that story about how we missed an opportunity to help Russia be Russia. But as we all would say, that just does not justify what Putin is doing, nevertheless.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's what many of us say.
Mm-hmm. Liz?
Who, me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, well, I was just saying, absolutely, it doesn't justify what Putin is doing, but it does to some degree explain how we got into this mess.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I take that point very seriously, but I would also think it doesn't help us right now. If we were sitting in Kiev, as Andrei is, thinking that in 2 weeks he may be vaporized, I don't know how it would be helpful to tell him, well, we acknowledge that the U.S. made the mistakes that led to this. How does that solve anything? I don't see it. I don't see how it does. And I don't know what the solution is.
Well, if the solution has to be a military one, then at least the West is helping considerably in making sure that the Ukrainians can at least put up a fight, which is what they're doing.
There are people who would say we should be supporting Russia. No kidding. I mean, friends of mine.
Unfortunately, people, I agree that, especially on the left, many people are very, very mixed up about this. You know, and many of us come from a leftist background. I do as well. And you know, but, you know, you have to face reality as reality. And believe me, Putin's Russia has nothing to do it's not a left. It's the very opposite. I remember years ago watching Russia Today in New York. I was surprised because, you know, I was looking at it as it was like a milder version of old Soviet style propaganda, you know, and it was all about the faults of the West and the injustices of the West, which would be very natural to see 40 years ago when it was the Soviet Union. But today, when Russia on the same scale is much more extreme, you know, the differences between the haves and have-nots in Russia are by far greater than in most Western countries today. And so, and things like that. And of course, you know, there's a lack of democracy and things like that as well. Anyway, again, I totally agree with that. I would, if you want, you know, on another time, I can give you my perspective of how, what were the key mistakes in Western policies that led to, Putin and becoming what he became and Russia becoming what he became. And there definitely were some very major faults. There were Pandora boxes that were opened up not by Russia, but by NATO and Western countries. However, today, again, today the question is, will this war go nuclear or not? Because if it goes nuclear, the whole world, it's not just something in Ukraine, it's a new world will wake up in. It's exactly 2 months ago, I woke up at 5 a.m, to the sound of explosions, and I knew that, I knew what happened. I understood right away what happened, because I didn't think that would happen, but I did understand that is possible. And but I also realized that this is a new reality for Europe since World War II. There obviously, the European continent did see lots of different wars. And, if you look like former Yugoslavia, terrible things happened there. But, in most cases, these were wars. It wasn't one country openly attacking another country without really any pretext, by all its available military force. No. And this was something really new for the modern history of the European continent. If we end up with nuclear weapons being used on the battlefield, this will be something new for the world. I mean, nuclear weapons were used, before, but in a context, in a very particular context, and an idea of working, we can speak about the faults of Western states. Let's think about how can we find ways to get these two major Eastern states, India and China, to play a key positive role in this situation, because they do have some leverage. Thanks.
Okay, agreed that we should all give our thoughts to that. If you have any more ideas, send it to me, mspencer@web.net. Alexei, you got the last word.
Okay, I have something to say as the last word. Maybe something quite inspiring for today. In my opinion, this war, I already was mistaken when in February I was predicting that the war would never begin. So maybe this kind of decreases the credibility of what I'm going to say. But I have a point of why this war will not turn into a nuke war, and that is the whole difference between the strategic and the tactical nuclear weapons, which does exist in the Russian military doctrine. But as far as I know, in other countries, there is no such categorization, and even in the Russian doctrine, it is quite conditional. So there is no real limit between strategic and tactical weapons. So there is no threshold, which means that the real boundary lies between conventional and nuclear weapons. So it will be a threshold for anyone that is very symbolically very difficult to cross, and for what I can imagine, it will be much easier to sell at least something as a victory, even though there haven't been any territorial gains, any significant territorial gains so far compared to what has been planned. They can tell the Russians that, for example, so and so many air bases have been destroyed, so and so many airfields, so and so many training centers. This is a victory. We have demilitarized the Ukraine, and we're okay with that. This is a victory. Ukraine will not recover from this again, so we are victors. And I'm hoping that this is easier than really cross this dangerous threshold of between the conventional weapons and nuclear weapons, which will turn the whole entire world against Russia. From the US to China to India to smaller nations of whatever kind, including North Korea, probably. So I'm optimistic in that respect. I hope
So
this
it's
time
just
I will
so
be
bad
right.
that nobody is ever going to do it. Okay. Well, God bless you. Let's hope you're right. Thank you all. It's been a stimulating and, in a way, horrifying conversation, hasn't it? But bless you all. Thanks. I'll see you in a month.
Bye, Meta. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Meta.
Thank you.
Project Save the World produces one of these shows 3 days a week and sometimes more. This is episode number 442. You can watch them or listen to them as audio podcasts on our website, tosavetheworld.ca. Eventually, we even post the transcripts there. When you get to the website, please look around because we have conversations going on there all the time about 6 global issues, plus potential reforms in governance, economics, and civil society. To find a particular talk show, enter its title or episode number in the search bar, or the name of one of the guest speakers. After you've watched or listened, scroll down and share your own ideas about the show with other viewers. This is a place for dialogue, so please join in. I'll see you there.